I'd like to welcome you to the Ethics Committee meeting. It is March the 1st, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. I note for the record that we have a quorum present. If you will join me for an invocation. Father, we're grateful for the challenges that you give us each day. We ask that you share with us your wisdom and your patience and your guidance. Help us to do what is right in your sight and do the things that will benefit the people of Georgia. In Christ's name I pray, amen. Welcome. We're glad you're here. I'd ask that you please continue to wear your mask out of respect for others unless you are addressing the committee in a testimony or a speaker chooses to do that. We're happy to accommodate that. If we have anyone here who may have a need for hearing assistance, please see a staff member. We have had sign-up sheets for witnesses before this meeting, and we have a large number of individuals who wish to share their positions with us. We welcome their input. And with that, we only have a single agenda item this afternoon. That is Senate Bill 241. And I'm going to recognize Leader Dugan to present his legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be back before the committee. I have before you Senate Bill 241. The version we are looking at is LC 280273S.
That is in the form of a substitute. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Leader, that's in the form of a motion. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion to consider a substitute. Is there a second? I have a second from Senator Senator Ambitarte. All those in favor of considering Senate Bill 241 in the version of a substitute, LC 0273S, indicate with the uplifted hand. Thank you. Hold that one more time. No, and those opposed, like sign. Chair sees none. So, thank you, Mr. Leader. Please present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it pleases the committee, we did a lot of talking last time within each section. What I'm going to do this time is I'll cover the same sections, and I'm just going to cover the what and why, but I will pause at any part along the way to answer questions about specific sections if y'all desire. Section 1 creates a hotline in the AG's office that voters can use to report any complaints or allegations of wrongdoing. The why is a couple different reasons. The one, the Secretary of State's office is kind of tied up in the execution of the election, and the second one is I think it's more prudent to have a different set of eyes looking at complaints that are coming in than the organization that is running the election process. So it's what was the thing from Reagan? Trust but verify. Section 2. This is creating a new section labeled 21-2-35, but it's going to refer back to 21-2-31, and that's how the state election board, and from now on I'm just going to call that the SEB. That's the way it's referred to a lot of the ways through there. It talks about their composition and their duties and responsibilities. The duties and responsibilities are broad, but somewhat vague within the code section. So all this does is put a little bit more clarity in what those duties and responsibilities are, and helps them more ably comply with Section 6 of their responsibilities as listed in 21-2-31. Section 3 allows the SEB, after due notice to the affected person or persons, and after the opportunity for that person or persons to appear before the SEB, and if the SEB deems that action should be taken, they will, in writing, submit that to the county's legislative delegation recommending temporary removal. Within 15 days of that notification, the legislative delegation may vote by a majority vote to temporarily remove and fill that vacancy for the period of the suspension or by a person or persons of their choosing. We have had numerous counties across the state, including several within the metro area, that have had their delegation ask for this ability and that has not been present in the past, and now we're adding it so that we have another opportunity for training and to ensure that we have the best people in the best place to do the job that we're expecting them to do, while still maintaining local control within the counties and the delegations that represent them. Section 4, we talked about the multi-state voter registration system that Eric, that Georgia does participate in, but this takes it from may to shall. Why? If you get into it, Eric has existed since 2012. They currently include 31 states. Their mission is to assist in the improving of our voter rolls and increase access to voter registration for all eligible citizens. That is too important an activity for our state to leave it as a may. It is not specifically called Eric in the bill to provide flexibility in the future should there be something as simple as a name change. So if Eric changes their name, we don't have to come back and change our law to keep up with that. Section 5 provides clarity of purpose for mobile voting facilities. As we talked about before, we know that the mobile voting facilities have been legal in the state of Georgia since 1998. What we needed to clarify in here was take it back to the original intent of what that was for in 1998, and that was to set up in place of existing voting precincts should those precincts, one, either not be available to voters to use because of health or safety reasons, or because of something as simple as you've had a dramatic increase in population in that area and the existing brick and mortar precinct can't handle the numbers and they need to be supplemented. This is a great tool in which to do that. Section 6 creates a list of reasons that allow voters to request a mail-in absentee ballot. First, Mr. Chair, do you want me to go through the terminology of what all different kinds of absentee ballots there are?
I believe it would be helpful just to iterate those briefly.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. When people say absentee ballots, they most commonly think of mail-in absentee ballots. That is one of three ways that you have absentee ballots. You have mail-in absentee ballots, you have absentee in person, that's more commonly known as early voting, and you have, I'm not even going to go with the full name, the military overseas ballots. And the military overseas ballots are covered by federal law, not state law. The first two are covered by state law. But within the early mail-in or the absentee mail-in ballots, what we're looking for is a way to more safely conduct that process, and I think that has been addressed already in other parts of the bill and in other bills. But also of equal importance is the number of ballots that are coming in mail-in absentee are really causing the counties to run 3 elections simultaneously. The setup and the operation for the mail-in, the early absentee, and then the configuration for the day of voting on the second Tuesday or the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November, have a limited number of people running elections at the same time. Additionally, the mail-in absentees are significantly costlier to the counties to run this just because of the mailing aspects of it, the return, and the collating and all that goes along with that. And the third and probably the most important part is the number of ballots that are rejected is significantly higher on the mail-in absentee ballots than it is the other forms of voting that we have. So in an effort to contain costs, to make sure that we have a elections program that is not over task, and to make sure that every eligible voter is sure that they have their vote recognized, those are the reasons that I'm looking at having some excuse requirement for absentee mail-in ballots. Now, what you're going to say is that's a pretty broad list, and it is a broad list of valid reasons for an excuse, but it still helps alleviate some of the concerns in the other 2 areas that I was talking about. Section 7 It's simply the process of how our voters request an absentee mail-in ballot and the information required to be submitted with that request. It's straightforward. All that's doing is providing clarity for those voters to know this is what I have to do to submit in for a mail-in absentee ballot. Section 8, that's simply the actions taken by the registrar or absentee ballot clerk when they receive a request for an absentee mail-in ballot. So one is on the voter's end and one is on the elections office end on the procedures, policies and procedures that we're setting in place. Number 9, or Section 9, describes the process that third-party advocates use during their efforts to increase mail-in absentee ballot request. Again, first of all, I'll take a little time with this. I commend all the organizations, regardless of their ideology, for their activities in the previous recent elections. If their goal was to get eligible voters out, they've been successful, and I applaud that. The only thing, well, I'm going to back up a little bit. Because of that is why we didn't take the route that Tennessee did, that just banned all third-party advocates from mailing these things out. I don't think that's the way to go. I think that any organization that's out there that encourages members of our society to take part in this process, that's a good thing. What I want to make sure we don't do, though, is create confusion from our citizens that some of these look like official government documents. And I want them to be clearly defined that they are not official government documents, that they are just like, again, I think like I said in the hearing the other day on Friday, it seems like a long time ago, almost the same type requirements that we have on political mailers, that who it's from, who is supporting it, and stating that this is not an official government document. Section 10. I'm going to change binders. Section 10. This one is pretty complicated. Absentee voting site clarification. In the existing language, it says site. We're changing it to building. Site has no definition. So the building does, and with the other requirements that we have with what creates a polling place, a precinct, it spells it out. This is just aligning it with the rest of our election law, Section 21. Section 11, identify the verification requirements for absentee ballots. The issue we have with signature verification before is they're subjective. I know that there is software out there that has proven to be up to 60% effective. To me, having counties purchase another set of software at their expense that only gives 60% certainty is a waste of their money. So this is changing the previously subjective signature verification requirements on absentee ballots to an objective identification verification requirement through various quantitative identification methods. So driver's license number, voter ID number, the last 4 of your social with your birth date. There's a list of approved items that you can use for verification. Section 11. There's uncertainty. Let me just read the section. Require that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. There was uncertainty surrounding the total number of absentee ballots that have been sent, received, reported. For the ballot so the solution is for the ballot transparency, the totals regarding absentee ballots must be reported to the counties. The Secretary of State currently reports these totals by county. So the only actual requirement for the counties that they must have is, and we're talking about before the actual election day, is they got to put a link on their county's website dealing with elections that ties them back to the Secretary of State's site, where they can already have that information on there by 10 a.m. the next morning. So the counties are not having to do this independently, though some do, some have the capacity to do it, but they're still reporting into the Secretary of State. This, for the smaller ones who don't have that ability, all they have to do is put a link to the Secretary of State's site on where they can find this. Section 13 requires that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. Counties were overwhelmed by the counting of the number of mail-in absentee ballots by the time of election. This serves two purposes. Anytime there are humans involved in any undertaking, there are going to be mistakes. This section allows for protections of the voter and to allow for correction of the mistake on the ballot and ensure that the vote is counted. Secondly, it aids the counties in the election process by giving them an earlier opportunity to start scanning mail-in absentee ballots. And I'm careful to use the term scanning and not tabulating. Sometimes those get juxtaposed, and they are two separate and distinct things. This is one. Instead of starting at the close of the election on that Tuesday to start scanning these things in, they have a period beforehand where they can start scanning them in. So on election day, at the appropriate time after the polls are closed, they can hit tabulate, and it speeds up the process significantly. Section 14 allows the Secretary of State to audit the information contained in the absentee ballot application or envelopes. Currently, the Secretary of State is not given the tools needed to ensure the integrity of an audit, and the solution is codified specific tools for the Secretary of State that are not explicitly stated. So you could look at what we have currently and say, I think he can, but there could be an argument that he does not. This puts into law that he does have that authority. And oh, by the way, as we were talking about on the other Friday, the judges that are actually securing the sealed ballots know that those are authorized auditors to go in and to conduct the audit if they're coming from the Secretary of State's office. Poll hours can only be extended by the judge of a superior court. Within Code Section 21-2-402, there's no formal outline on the process for opening and closing polls or extending poll hours. This has been a standing practice that you've seen in the state over the last several years, where judges have ordered decrees to hold polls open for a variety of reasons. Most commonly is polls not being able to open at the prescribed time in the morning. So this takes what has been a practice and puts it into law. Section 16 requires that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. There are instances of confusions concerning if the vote tabulation was continuing. This is requiring that the ballots cast in each precinct be counted and tabulated, and that the tabulation shall not cease until all are counted, to ensure that every citizen's vote is fairly accounted for and posted publicly. I understand this may mean shifts, that we're not going to expect one person to sit there for 48 hours, but we think it's important enough that once they get started, that they continue on. Section 17, require that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. Aligns code to reflect the changes made in Section 16 and eliminates the ability to cease voting at the discretion of the superintendent. Right now, what it says is they can stop counting at any time the superintendent decides. And because of what we're doing and what we're asking for in 16, we needed to change 17 to coincide or correspond with. Section 18, require that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. There is no specification in the previous code when the superintendent needs to have the computation of the votes completed by. There's an assumption that we have, but there's nothing that's specified. This section now gives the superintendent a timeline for when the computation of votes must be completed and to hold these officers accountable. Section 19, require that each county report total number of absentee ballots received by the election day deadline. Problem that there was a discrepancy when the tabulation could begin. This section amends previous code section 21-2-493 to codify a direct start for when tabulating of ballots can begin. This provides for consistency across all 159 counties in Georgia. Section 20, prevent ballot harvesting. We talked about this on Friday as well. Ballot harvesting is already against the law in Georgia, but there seems to be some confusion as what is ballot harvesting. This puts some clarity into what it is, so that people don't inadvertently and unwillingly break the law in Georgia. Section 21. Make emergency rules of the state election board subject to the veto of a majority of the Senate Judiciary Committee or the House Judiciary Committee. Our constitutional officers need great flexibility during times of emergency, but that power is not absolute. We need time to be able to review these actions. We need to be able to be prepared for any future emergency situations to maintain the integrity of our elections. Solution, provide the legislative body the ability to preside over the emergency rules coming from the state election board. We have this ability already as it currently sits in non-emergency situations. That is the process in which the state election board operates when we're not under a health emergency. We feel strongly that even during a declared emergency, that the legislature, one of the equal branches of government, still has its responsibility to do checks and balances with the other branches. Again, Mr. Chair, these items are severable. That's towards the end of the bill. And for those of y'all that wonder what that is, should a portion of this bill have an issue in court, it can be ruled on separately. Mr. Chairman, that's what I have. I'm subject to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. We'll now entertain questions from the committee. Chair recognizes Senator Gooch, the Majority Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Leader, I appreciate all your hard work. You've been working on this bill for seems like weeks now since we took office early January. Could you go back over Section 2? Because the explanation you gave doesn't coincide with the way I read that, or maybe I was misunderstanding it.
Okay.
Could you look at Section 2 on lines 38 through 41? Make sure that's what your intent was.
I'm sorry. You're talking about the consent decrees?
Yes.
Yeah, that's that. When I was talking about the state election board's abilities, their duties and responsibilities, there's some vagueness in what it was.
Right.
What the Section 6 that I mentioned to you in the code says that the state election board has the ability to provide advice or to the legislature for implementation. What I'm saying is, even at all times, we should be conferred with, and instead of just them making decisions on their own. That's
correct.
They have a huge responsibility, but we have one as well.
So this would limit the Secretary of State's authority to make any arrangements outside the rule of law.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Harrell.
Yes, I'm going to get really back to basics with this question.
Okay.
We have 2 LC numbers and 2 substitutes. Which one are we dealing with?
You're dealing with LC 280273S. I think you also may have LC 280274S.
Yes.
The chair only recognized 273S. So that's the bill we are currently considering.
We just had 2 in our books.
You do, and that's in case we need the second. That would require motion from the committee, but we have it available. So the current bill under consideration is LC 280273S.
Okay, I got you. I had really hoped we were going to have this bill over the weekend, as I stated on Friday, so that we could study it. You realize that we're looking at this for the first time.
I do, and that was also our intent until we had the massive technology issue that we had. That fortunately or unfortunately, it was safe to have some of our legislative council working remotely, but when that system crashed, it brought us to a standstill for a while.
So given that we're looking at this for the first time, is it the committee's intention to move forward to a vote today?
It is the chairman's intent to move this bill today. This is not the first time we've seen it. We saw it actually last Thursday morning in a newer form. This is a substitute to the bill that we saw Thursday morning, last Thursday.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would add that nothing has been added to what we talked about on Thursday. There has been stuff that was removed, and in that meeting, I tried to make sure that I was clear on everything that was going to be removed.
Okay, thank you. Like I said, I just needed some process clarification.
Yeah, I understand.
Thank you. Other questions? Other questions? Chair recognizes the senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, I attempted to make an amendment to the bill, but obviously we weren't quite in a position to do that. And so in your folders, there is another substitute, as you mentioned. It's LC 280274S. The only difference between the two versions is 74S strikes the current Section 6 dealing with the elimination, no excuse, absentee ballot voting. There are also other cross-references that will be consistent with that as well in the substitute. And so, as I said last week, what we're doing with this bill, I think, is a good thing. I think we're making the process more transparent. We're adding security to the process, something that Republicans, Democrats should all get together and get behind, in my opinion. But I do not support eliminating the no excuse absentee ballot voting in our state, especially when we are securing that process through this bill. We are requiring the ID number to go along with a ballot now. We're making it consistent where there's one form of voting for everybody in our state, one consistent process. And I think second, on that point, the excuses can get confusing for people. I think it does make things inconsistent. And as you alluded to, I think the excuses kind of eat up the whole idea of it as well. Though I get why you're trying to do that, to make sure folks who can't be present can vote by absentee. And so lastly, the House, I believe, had a bill today, and I mentioned this last week. I've not heard consistent support for this around this building either. And so I think it would be prudent for us to have a final version of the bill, given that this will be engrossed, I'm assuming, that we can all get behind and can become law in our state. So with all that, if you will accept it this way to make it clean, I'd like to strike the bill in its entirety and replace it with the substitute to Senate Bill 241 LC 280274S.
I have a motion to amend via a substitute. Is there a second? Is there a second? Chair sees no second.
All right, thank you very much.
The motion fails. Chair recognizes the senator from Augusta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On Section 5 on page 4, would that section actually preclude counties if they wanted to use the portable polling place just as a mechanism to possibly alleviate large crowds on an election day? Would that now preclude the use of portable polling places for those purposes?
No, they could move them to where they have areas where they have large crowds to use it to alleviate it that way. They can't just be random roving mobile voting units. So to answer your question, as I understood it, and you said to help alleviate large crowds, if I think I meant to say, if I didn't, forgive me, but I meant to say if you have precincts that have had population growth that does have large crowds that they can't handle with the existing facility, that would be an appropriate use for those assets.
Okay, but they wouldn't be able to use it like beforehand. They would have to be, the crowd would have to actually be there, I guess is what I'm saying.
And the early voting sites that are approved for early voting, they can co-locate with those for the same purpose to alleviate any overcrowding or lengthy lines that you had in one of those locations.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
If the question,
Go ahead.
I tell you what, I'm going to stop asking since you said thank you. I'm just going to leave it there.
I think I got it.
Other questions from the committee? Chair recognizes Senator Harrell.
Section 20 that you said has to do with ballot harvesting, which is already illegal, but you said this very short section clarifies. Can you please explain how that language clarifies? Because I really don't understand what it's getting at.
For example, if you had a large group that was gathering in a common area with a moderator sitting in the front going through the ballots and explaining why a candidate A would be more appropriate than candidate B for all that is ballot harvesting. So what that's doing in there is saying you can't intentionally observe an elector. So then we get into and I think I mentioned this the other day as well. So then am I breaking the law if I take my 6-year-old daughter into, no, that is already covered in law, and it's honestly that it's your husband, wife, son, daughter, niece, nephew, mother-in-law, father-in-law, grandmother, grandfather, fathers. You know, if you have multiple, when you get to that list, I think there's 22 people that can accompany you and observe your voting. But when you sit people in an environment where you're sitting there observing their vote, that's illegal.
So would this be limited to absentee ballots or mail-in ballots?
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah, yes, it would be. I'm sorry. I spoke to, because, you know, by nature, when you're going into an in-person, whether it be absentee in-person early or day of,
Right.
They obviously wouldn't have, unless it was your, and I don't want to get like the
Long
distinguished rules chair, the mother, father, you know,
Yeah.
that list again.
It's just, you know, and I don't have a legal background, but these new voting machines, the screens are big, and
Yes.
you can see how people are voting.
Yes.
So if you look to see how somebody was voting in a polling place, couldn't that fall under these words?
You're not supposed to be doing that already.
Yeah, but it's hard not to.
Well, not
It's
if you just
hard
don't
not to.
look. I mean, it's I don't have an issue of not looking over somebody else's shoulder at what they're voting at. But I wouldn't support a bill if you wanted to introduce it that, you know, you've seen on the screens where they have, like in the computer screens you have here, where you can put it's an extra cover over the top of it, where you can't see what's on the screen and looking straight on. And so I've kind of got my hands full with this one, but I would be glad to support if you would want to bring that.
There does seem to be like a privacy issue with the new big screens.
There's it's a ease in seeing them, but you're right. There is they are visible.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Harrell. Other questions for the author of the bill? See no further questions at this time. The chair will now entertain witnesses to come and speak to the bill. We have a number of witnesses this afternoon. We're grateful for your presence and we look forward to your input. Just a ground rule or two. We have 40 or so individuals who've asked to speak to this legislation. We may not be able to accommodate everyone, but I'm going to start by asking those who present to make your comments to the point, ask you to make them brief, and that as you listen to witnesses, not repeat the things that have already been indicated. So we're going to start with those who were kind enough to be here on Thursday. They were here and requested an opportunity to speak. Each presenter will begin their presentation with their name, their organization or contact information briefly, and then if you would take 2 minutes and share your input. The first witness is DJ Grinovich. Is that close? That's correct. Hold on just a second. A point of question?
Parliamentary inquiry.
Certainly.
As a matter of housekeeping, do we have? Is your assistant keeping time, and we have 2 minutes per speaker?
That's correct, sir.
Good. That'll only be 80 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
As if y'all line up, and if y'all get one by one behind her,
your math is impeccable, sir. Impeccable. What I didn't say is there are 42, so that would be 84 minutes, but that's okay. Point of order.
Would it be appropriate that if we try to balance the people coming up to speak, half for and half against? So if we do run out of time, we've heard from people on both sides of the argument.
The gentleman makes a positive note. We will work to alternate. I will say the first 5 individuals be given preference. That's because they were here Thursday morning.
That's fine.
And then after the first 5, we will look to alternate favorable and opposed. Favor and opposed. Is that acceptable to the committee?
Suits everybody.
Thank you very much. Wave off. All right. Thank you. Now the chair recognizes Ms. Grinovich.
I'm actually a McIntyre now, but we filled it out. I'm still learning that. I did submit my comments to you all in written form as well, in case there's any further. I do want to make one clarification. My email address has an H at the end of it for Grinovich, and I am Danielle McIntyre. And I'd like to speak on behalf of Georgia Council of the Blind, just one of the representatives that I have just a few little tiny things. So 2 concerns. One is in regard to the portable mobile polling place. I realize that's been in legislation for a while now. One is that, does that have to be accessible for wheelchairs and those who have mobility issues? And then secondly, I know the voting machines for visually impaired were not around at the point when that became law. So I'd want to make sure that they do have an accessible machine if they were to use an additional place for like that. Second is section 7. When we talk about the absentee ballot, I do want to thank you all for adding in that they can request that online. However, I do want to ensure that that website is screen reader friendly so that our blind people can easily navigate that, and also for their mobile app when it's with voiceover. So I want to make sure all of our blind and visually impaired members can request an absentee ballot, and do request that you, as a committee, and Mr. Dugan as the senator sponsoring the bill, look into voting absentee online. I know there's a lot of concerns with that. However, for a visually impaired person outside of Metro Atlanta, getting a ride, getting away to a polling place is very difficult. If they do absentee ballot, someone else has to do that for them. And I would love for them to have the privilege of voting independently, whether that be absentee at home or actually being able to get to the polling place on the day. And the third thing is just a note of comment, is that the new voting machines, as much as we love them, the audio is not friendly to your visually impaired people. We had a very difficult time with that. We've spoken to Secretary of State's office, and they have told us it's up to the legislation to make any changes. I'm not sure why, but I do want to bring that up as a concern for the visually impaired community.
Thank you, Ms. Grinovich. We appreciate your input. The chair now recognizes Betsy Grinovich. Would you like to testify as well? Okay. All right. The second witness today is Betsy Grinovich, and again, I believe this is the same group. Is that correct, yes. Ms. Grinovich? Okay. We welcome your input.
Just step into your left. To your left.
Thank you for letting us have this opportunity. I will not cover what she already did, though I had some of the same points, but I will cover some others. One concern of the Georgia Council of the Blind is how are you going to, someone going to prove their disability to vote absentee? We have the same issue with guide dogs and other dogs. They can put anything on a piece of paper, but that doesn't mean it's real. So that's our concern with that one. Another major concern is to help someone vote absentee, unless you've changed it and I missed it. It requires it to be a relative or a caregiver in the home. Many of our blind individuals live alone. They have no family near them, so they would have no way to get assistance with the absentee ballot the way it's written at this point. And that would be leaving out, especially in a metro area, it'd be leaving out quite a few. The ability to check the ballot from the voting machines also isn't addressed in this bill. Fortunately, the Secretary of State allowed us to use our devices this past election to do that, but it wasn't addressed in this one at all. Where when you print the ballot off, we have no way to check it, and not every individual who is visually impaired or print disabled has a device to check it. So we would like to see something addressed on that. You may not be able to do it on this bill, but do it soon. And so those were my major concerns that she did not cover.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your input. Chair recognizes Cindy Battles, People's Agenda.
Good afternoon. Again, members of the committee, thank y'all so much for allowing us the opportunity to speak. Again, my name is Cindy Battles, and I am the Policy and Engagement Director for Georgia Coalition for the People's Agenda. I rise today in opposition to SB 241, with all due respect to Senator Dugan. I have a couple of issues right now. One is being shocked that we're actually going to vote on this legislation today. To my knowledge, y'all got it today. It is a comprehensive piece of legislation that's being forced through committee without taking the opportunity to really see what the impact is. Up until just a few minutes ago, we didn't even know which of the subs we were going to be looking at to try and analyze. So it's hard to speak to the points of the bill because we haven't had a chance to read it. The public hasn't had a chance to read it. If the intent of all of these things is to actually create confidence in our elections, doing so in a rushed, non-transparent way doesn't accomplish that. So I'm going to respectfully ask, without being able to speak to a whole lot of things about the bill, that you would at least consider having another hearing with public comment so that people have had a chance to read what Senator Dugan has presented before this committee today.
We appreciate your input. The chair recognizes Pachaya Wenachalan. I'm sure that was a correct mispronunciation of your name. I apologize.
Thank you. I'll put this here. I'm going to remove my mask.
Certainly.
Good afternoon. My name is Pichia Poi Winichagal, and I'm an attorney with the SPLC Action Fund. And I am testifying on behalf of the SPLC Action Fund as well as the NAACP, Legal Defense and Educational Fund, LDF. We oppose in the strongest possible terms SB 241, and as Cindy Battles just made apparent today, that the most recent version of this bill was not available to the public prior to today's hearing. I believe it's actually not currently up on the website and made publicly accessible. And so I can only testify to the photo ID absentee ballot request provisions of the bill, which I have some familiarity with, but request to submit additional written testimony to the committee regarding my comprehensive concerns, if that is permissible.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We welcome your input in writing. Thank you.
Thank you. So my main concern today is that the enactment of SB 241 will create unnecessary barriers and burdens on voters that disproportionately impact racial minority, low-income, elderly, rural, disabled, and student voters in violation of the First, 14th, 15th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution, as well as the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And in addition to that, the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if you are to vote on SB 241 today, we urge you to vote no and to immediately withdraw this piece of legislation. First, the purported justifications for the photo ID requirement, specifically for absentee voting, are pretextual. 47 states hold elections with vote-by-mail procedures that do not require a photo ID. And fraud rates are infinitesimally small, and the same is true for Georgia, according to several statements by Governor Kemp and other statewide officials. There's just no evidence of widespread voter fraud, and so vote-by-mail laws and procedures remain safe, secure, and reliable.
Miss, your time has expired. We welcome your written input, and we'll be happy to consider that as we continue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Chris Bruce. Mr. Bruce.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Christopher Bruce, Political Director for the ACLU of Georgia, an organization dedicated to protecting your civil rights and civil liberties. Now, Georgia had an unprecedented turnout during the election of 2020. So I'm going to keep my comments brief as well because I don't believe that we're up to date on the current version. And I would ask this committee to table this piece of legislation to allow the public more time to actually digest it and move forward with it. You know I love your 8 a.m. meetings, Mr. Chairman.
7 a.m. can be even better. So, and you've been here, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's look at how this bill, Mr. Leader, looks at how it touches Georgians by requiring them a narrow set of excuses in order to vote by mail. So we know 1.3 million Georgians voted by absentee ballot during the general election, and 1.1 million voted during the runoff. I make perfect points for this to let you know how these type of bills are actually being put forth. And if we ever have a chance of putting together a government permission slip on how you vote, then we're going to be running to certain type of issues. A lack of readily accessible transportation, the demands of a job, family, emergencies, invisible disabilities, as well as chronic illnesses and geographical challenges all limit one's access to the polls. Georgians face these burdens, and vote by mail without having an excuse is one of the ways that we get over these type of hurdles. Georgians have been able to cast absentee ballots by mail without having to provide an excuse for over 15 years. This current practice placed Georgians among the supermajority of states. That's 34 states plus the District of Columbia that allow their citizens to access no excuse absentee by mail as a right. With absolutely no evidence of malpractice or fraud, why would we pass a law that makes it more difficult for these votes and treats the government like a babysitter who has to give voters permission to cast a ballot? So, second, let's look at how this bill continues to look into requiring personal identification by being able to scan, print it, mailed, or upload it. We know that 42% of voters in the general election and only 47% of absentee voters in the runoff were aged 66 years and older. The rollover absentee list this past election cycle, nearly 600,000 voters, all of whom are Georgians who are either disabled, senior citizens, or both. Senior citizens and those who are disabled are more likely to be targeted for identity theft. It is not only burdensome, but it's also dangerous to force all of these voters to include sensitive information every time that they vote.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce. We appreciate your input, and mostly I appreciate your continued efforts to represent the people of Georgia at these hearings. You've been here every time. I want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
We look forward to
Chairman.
your input
Yes,
in
and
written form.
We'll continue to support this committee throughout the process. If you need any data or information, let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Thank you.
Chair now recognizes Pamela Reardon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Pamela Reardon. I'm with the GOP and other organizations. I'm an activist and proud of it. I was on the ground during these elections, and I want to dispel a myth. There was plenty of fraud. It is just hung up in the Secretary of State's office somewhere. I even have allegations of fraud in there and have been contacted 3 weeks ago that I had to resubmit all my documents, all my pictures, and all my videos on 4 different instances of line warming, which is illegal, okay? And you've already stated that. So it doesn't matter if you say that ballot harvesting is illegal, line warming is illegal, and let's see, voting twice is illegal, taking private funds to influence elections is illegal, which was done, and the Secretary of State says that it's not, but it is. It's a tax problem that will come out. So I have seen it. I have answered the fraud line. I have seen voters disenfranchised, okay? Not because of their color. I have no idea what their color is, but they have called saying that they went to the polls to vote on the machine and they were told they could not vote because someone had already voted with their absentee ballot. So this is why we need these new changes, because I was also doing the poll watching in the runoff election. I was at 3 or 4 different South Cobb and South Fulton precincts, and all the poll managers said that they were getting 35 to 40%, even higher, ballots coming back in, and they were voting on the machines. So what a waste of money. And they had to cancel those. So that's why I support this bill.
We appreciate your input.
Okay.
And thank you for your engagement. Chair recognizes Hannah Garalisi. Again, I apologize. Gebralisi. Hannah Gebralisi. We'll move forward. The chair recognizes Garland Favento. Thank you.
Favorito. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had time on remarks for 3 minutes according to the normal Senate rules, but Mr. Grossman, who follows me, has agreed to give up his 2 minutes so I can finish what I need to tell you. You have a handout in front of you. Most of you already know me. It's good to be back again for the third year in a row. I'm a career IT professional, co-founder of Voter GA. We've led this election integrity movement for 15 years. In December, the House and Senate committee had hearings, and they uncovered a significant amount of election fraud that Pam Reardon just spoke to a minute ago. A couple of things that are important I want to mention is that the 4 of the 6 people who are here today who have sworn affidavits that they handled fraudulent ballots in the Fulton County audit that occurred on November 14th and 15th. You've seen the State Farm Arena video. There's evidence on that of illegal hiding, scanning, and rescanning of ballots. You also have the tabulation failures. In Coffee County, multiple triple recount failures. You should have all the documentation on that. There's 13 megabytes of documentation on that. In addition, the Ware County system did, in fact, flip votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. The reason we know this is because we have the certified Secretary of State's results from the election. We have the published hand count results of the audit from the county and the written confirmation from the county elections director that the vote totals are correct. They show a flip. I have a unrebutted sworn affidavit on that if anybody wants to keep saying that it didn't happen. I want to move quickly to the what we call the irreconcilable hand count audit. Here's what we found on that you're probably not aware of yet. The Dominion certified results have nearly 200,000 extra Fulton County votes that they have no batch sheets for. They have over 250,000 extra Cobb County votes in the Dominion certified results.
Thank you, Mr. Favento. Thank you for your time.
My 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. We will recognize Mr. Grossman, and he can continue in your place. Brad Grossman. Mr. Grossman.
My name's Brad Grossman. I'm just a private citizen. I have a farm down in Meriwether County. Chemical engineer. I come out of retirement. Oh, so I'm so upset about fraud that I come out of retirement. I try to find a solution. In my life, you do a root cause analysis. You first of all, you preserve the data, preserve the evidence. Then you do a very detailed problem statement. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Then you do a cause and effect analysis and come up with solution. And I'm afraid you guys are solving voter fraud instead of election fraud. And I would urge you to put in some transparency. Mr. Favorito was going to put it down, but basically 3 things: make the ballots publicly available, make the ballot images publicly available, and require counties to allow their election management system to be imaged upon demand for independent forensic exams. Any good root cause analysis, you're going to have a solution that's effective and it solves your problem. And it prevents recurrence, it's within your control, and it meets your objectives. And if your objectives are to bring back voter confidence, then you should add these transparency requests immediately into your bill before you pass it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for your input. The chair acknowledges the written testimony of Voter Georgia and the details that are provided there. Chair recognizes Michelle Milhoff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Close enough. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, Chairman, committee members. My name is Michelle Milhoff. Thank you for your attention. I'm a citizen, and I just wanted to come here and voice my opinion. I do support Voter GA's recommendations for the provisions for the omnibus bill and for public access. I I'm an American that believes there was massive fraud in the elections and voter fraud in the 2020 election. And I was very dismayed to learn that even Georgia may be the worst state in the nation. I've done my research. I've spent time watching and listening to hours and hours of expert and eyewitness testimony of the hundreds of sworn affidavits on the fraud from the many states in question, including video evidence of the State Farm Arena and video from the TCF Center in Michigan. It's not hard to believe this election was stolen. What makes it more believable is the inaction from our local elected officials. Ignoring evidence of the election fraud because of the election is already over is like ignoring a murder because a victim is already dead. Why haven't you demanded an authentic, transparent forensic audit of the ballots? Why have you sit silently by? Why haven't you done anything to protect our most sacred right? This isn't about the presidency, and it isn't about either party. It's about whether our vote will ever matter again. The 2020 election spent more money ever in history, $14 billion. The most voter turnout in history, the most mail-in voting in history. It requires the most significant forensic audit in history, and please don't tell us you don't have the money and then spend millions on upcoming campaigns. We demand and deserve 100% of the ballots, and the other states such as Arizona, we will not stop. Our country and our freedoms hang in the balance. You are either for the people or you're not.
Thank you, Ms. Milhoff. We appreciate your input. Chair recognizes Ted Metz. Mr. Metz.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing public comment today, in public even. I am Ted Metz. I live in Cobb County. I'm a voter. I do activism, and many of you have probably seen me around the halls before. I do applaud you for trying to do some things about the election integrity. There are more things that should be done. All of the recommendations are in your hands now. The reason I rise today is because I think really, when it comes right down to it, there is absolutely no reason why a voter can't show up at the polls on election day and cast a vote, even if he's already sent in an absentee ballot. It's called a do-over. As some of you know, that Medicare allows you to make final choices up to the deadline of choosing your Medicare coverage every year. The last choice sticks. Our electronic systems allow poll managers to alter records. So if someone shows up on election day, even though they've already cast an absentee ballot, they should be allowed to change their vote. After all, it could turn out that the candidate of choice was just caught with some foreign leader eating human babies, and they don't want that guy anymore, so they want to change their mind. We should accommodate a change of mind provision in all of this and allow someone to actually show up at the poll on voting day and cast a vote that may be different from their original absentee ballot. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your input. Thank you for your input. We appreciate your presence and your engagement. Chair recognizes Randall Mangham. Is that correct, sir? Sorry? Mangham.
Thank you, sir, Mr. Chairman. Randall Mangham, I'm an attorney. I'm in my individual capacity today because I love Georgia. You started this meeting with a prayer. I love Jesus. I'm going to say that because there are some Christians up here that are very fervent. They believe an election was stolen. We have to do something about this problem other than fighting the Civil War over and over again. In the 1950s, there were a tale of two cities. One was Montgomery and one was Atlanta. And something happened over in Montgomery, and all the business left Montgomery and came to Atlanta. We have business here, and my challenge today, and I'm speaking to the businesses that put money into your campaigns. I was one of you sitting in this Georgia General Assembly. And I love Georgia, and I'm disappointed that there is a perception about our voting here. So I would simply say, those that really think there's a steal, we need to get together. I challenge you, all of you who did all that clapping a minute ago, I will help you and get to the root of it. But when you get to the end of it, let's end this fighting, because we are one. We got to learn to get along together. And that's my statement. I think that's about 2 minutes. I want to say something else.
Chair would ask that you address the bill at hand. Thank you.
And the bill at hand gives a perception that we're going in the wrong direction to suppress the vote. That is what this bill is perceived to do, because the GAO has done a study in 2014. I will yield the well because.
Thank you for your input. We're grateful for your presence.
Thank you. I ask you humbly to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Bridget Thorne.
I'm Bridget Thorne. I was a former Fulton County manager, precinct manager for 9 years, and a Dominion certified poll tech. A whistleblower is a person, usually an employee, who exposes information or activity within a private, public, or government organization that is deemed illicit, illegal, unsafe, or waste, fraud, or abuse of taxpayer funds. Reluctantly, I guess I am a whistleblower. I testified at the Senate hearing about concerning things that I heard. But before that, I did everything I could to get someone, anyone, to listen to me. I contacted Fulton County Elections. They didn't respond to my emails. I contacted the Secretary of State investigator before and after the election. I was muted by the State Board of Elections. Ryan Germany muted me. You see, corrupt governments seek to harm the whistleblower. I was fired for testifying at the Senate hearing. I have emails and texts from election staff that warned me I was going to be fired for testifying. Yet Richard Barron goes on TV and says he didn't even listen to the hearing. He has been investigating me instead. He slanders me. So why is Fulton County Richard Barron seek to harm me?
Chair would request that the witness address the bill on the table.
Okay. I saw illegal, no chain of custody handling of 40,000 plus early State Farm arena ballots that came into the warehouse. I worked with employees, happy face employees that were unqualified and inexperienced. I saw Dominion, now Fulton County employee, and a consultant printing random ballots in the warehouse at 10 p.m. on November 1st. I am concerned that the ACLU was placed in every 255 Fulton County precincts and was given access to the entire ElectionNet absentee voter database on their personal computers. Is it that I reported that I am missing, to this day, 400 blank absentee ballots that were substituted in my precinct?
The chair appreciates your input.
Thank you. I can't get any answers to this day.
We'd ask that you please submit the rest of your comments in writing, and we'd be grateful for that. Thank you. Chair recognizes Chris Peck.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senate. I'm not an advocate. I've never been to a hearing before, ever. This is my first. Like this gentleman here, I'd like to have this meeting achievement that we get to a solution and stop the fighting. Because frankly, what's been going on is terrible. The idea that people think there's no fraud, I've done enough research, I've read enough, I've seen enough, I know enough. And to ignore it is ridiculous. The idea that you have an election that you cannot verifiably audit is ridiculous. And this bill does not allow one to be able to do that. And it needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Appreciate your input. Thank you. The chair recognizes Elena Marino.
Hi, I'm Elena Marino. I'm technically representing myself, though I belong to a lot of groups. I am originally from Cuba. I have a friend who's a documentarian from Cuba and one from Venezuela. Both have been talking to me about Dominion for years. And I didn't believe them. And then when I watched the election, I saw the vote counts actually drop. I saw, and I have a picture on my phone, when they called it for Biden in a state, while the numbers they were actually showing favored Trump by, I think it was 12%. I have it on my phone. So I started geeking out after that. I'm an Excel nerd. I have a master's in finance. I'm not a statistician. But I had read that Brad Raffensperger had the detailed audited report online. So I downloaded it, and I have spent, and I'm happy to send this to anybody, I have spent 2 months sorting, filtering, and playing with this data. One of the things that I found initially, and I thought there would be a video to show it because I can't, obviously, is that there were tons of repeated ratios, identical ratios, over and over and over and over again. But not being a statistician, I didn't think, well, maybe I can't argue this. Then I saw the statistician Edward Solomon, who talked that those repeated ratios were supposedly sent across multiple precincts at the exact same time to the second. So I said, well, I have to be able to find the pattern if I go back to the data. So I did. How they controlled it is by controlling the Biden count in each of the repeated ratios. This is
The chair
8 pages.
requests that the witness address the bill on the table.
That you don't cover anything on that bill that addresses transparency of the data, because that is where I think, and I have plenty of proof, that is, unfortunately, somebody is manipulating that data.
We'd ask that you submit your evidence.
I did.
And we would be grateful to give that consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Marcia Cox, excuse me. Marcia Cox. Thank you.
Thank you for, oops, sorry. My name is Marcia Cox. I'm in my own personal, talking about my own personal view. I'm part of different groups, but it's so, I came here not prepared to do this, but I see this bill hasn't been seen truly, and being, be able to actually being voted. I recommend what the voter Georgia GA says, that we need somebody different from the Secretary of State to check the ballots because we don't have confidence. From everybody here that you see, they don't feel comfortable with the results of this election. We are trying to make it this for the next election, but when you don't address the problem, and this is not just me or this, I went to my entire neighborhood and I didn't see anybody there. They're confident with the election. So it's very, very difficult for us to go above that and never address the problem. Like the lady said, let's move on because the victim has died. So nothing we can do about it. So I truly believe this is very important, that the recommendation, the voter GA for a private thing. And as soon as you guys are reading a little bit more, I said, I'm originally from Brazil. In Brazil, we have 1 day for voting. We have 200 million people in Brazil. If we can do there, I'm not saying, it's very, very interesting that
the gentle lady's time has expired. I'd ask that you complete your testimony in written form, and we'd be happy to accept that.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Dr. Gordon Rolle, or Roll.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Chairman, my name is Dr. Gordon Roll. I'm an educator, educational consultant. I'm also a member of the Republican Party. I'm a chair for the District 65 Republican Party. And, but I've lived in South Fulton for over 40 years. And I participated in this election in a variety of different capacities, from working in a particular poll to being a poll manager. I adjudicated, and I also worked in early voting. And frankly, I'm very disappointed with Fulton County Board of Elections. I think at every point I saw some fraud. And I think that we definitely need a system that verifies the absentee ballot system. We really need to have a lot more transparency. We need to have a way of having both sides, or ways of looking at it from a two-party system of people from both sides of the party overseeing the election process and verifying that the ballots are counted correctly. I was at a precinct that they had an accident outside the precinct. The power line was knocked down. The precinct electricity was cut off, but they were able to continue on with voting for about approximately 5 hours. But they were doing this with they were doing this using the hotspots, and to my knowledge, that breached the capacity for it to be secure and for someone to come in and hack that.
The gentleman's time has expired. I'm sorry, Dr.
Well, thank you
Rolls.
very much. I appreciate it.
I'd like for you to add any comments in written form, and we'd be happy to accept that.
Thank
We
you very
appreciate your interest. We appreciate your presence and input. Chair recognizes Susan Voiles. Ms. Voiles.
I want to thank you all for your diligence. Thank you for what you've done in putting this together. I'm Susie Voiles, is what most people call me. Formerly, I was an over 20-year poll manager who upheld my oath of office, and because I upheld my oath of office, which says I will do my best during the election to make sure there is no fraud, deceit, abuse during the election or the continuance thereof. One of the things I saw was they were counterfeit ballots. That's the only way I can describe them. They were on the absentee form. They had never been folded, and it was so egregious to me that someone would do this to all of our votes. Every single ballot in this batch of 110, 106 of them had been copied. They were copied from the presidential office down to the last referendum. Every vote was exactly the same. As long as I have done this, that has never happened. But what I wanted to say about some of the absentee measures, I really applaud you for putting back in measures that will give us guidelines on why we should vote absentee on a paper ballot. I appreciate that more than you know, having done this as long as I have done it, and you've given a good system. Alabama has pretty much the same reasons for absentee ballots and no early voting. One of the things that is kind of troubling me about this is perhaps this isn't final, I'm not seeing any penalties. Florida is in the same circuit court that we are. They're in the 11th Circuit. Their bills have been in existence for over 20 years.
Regrettably, the gentlelady's time has expired. We appreciate your input, and we look forward to you submitting the rest of your input via written testimony.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you for all your hard work.
The chair recognizes Barbara Hartman. Barbara Hartman.
Barbara Hartman. I'm going to stop right now. I've been a poll manager, assistant manager for over 25 years. I've also been a poll watcher, and I was a monitor. I was a monitor with Susie, as a matter of fact. Held the ballots up. They were mailed. They had never been creased. You cannot mail an absentee ballot in if it's not creased. Two attorneys from Miami staked out and watched the early voting drop boxes, and they saw in the middle of the night people coming in with their hoodies and their masks, dropping stacks of ballots. And we know that this has happened in nursing homes, assisted living homes. It's very easy to pay an orderly $500, $1,000 and ask them to go drop these ballots in. The thing that really concerns me, though, is early voting. Most of our votes were either early voting or they were by absentee voting. The poll that I assistant managed on election day for the presidential election, had very few voters compared to what they normally have because everybody had already voted. I didn't see anything in this bill that addressed the rules for the mobile unit nor for early voting. Now, the mobile unit I poll watched. At the end, most people you all have no idea how this system works. But at the end, two men drive up, they secure the machines. One man then gets in to the driver's seat, drives them to the maintenance garage. When I asked where he was taking them, he wouldn't tell me at first, but then finally he said the maintenance garage. The maintenance garage is over by the jail, and then he looked and said, oh, it'll be under lock and key. You don't just handle ballots that way. They're sacred. You should have maybe a police escort or somebody that can make sure that there is a chain of custody. These ballots have a little bitty thin plastic seal, and this seal can be twisted off. It could, a little match or a little something hot can put it back together again. Or since there's no paperwork going with it, all they have to do is change the seal number and put a new one on. Early voting sites, at the very end, a gentleman comes in, he takes all the machines have all the ballots. They could have 10,000, 20,000 ballots in there. And
the gentle lady's time has expired.
He takes them to the World Congress Center and leaves them.
I would ask that you submit the remainder of
I
your
will do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Chris Chambers. Chris Chambers. Mr. Chambers. Mr. Chambers waves. Chair recognizes Pedro Valoria.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Pedro Valoria, and I'm testifying today on behalf of the Latino Community Fund Georgia. The Latino Community Fund Georgia advances people's democracy, builds capacity in our organizations and communities, and creates and facilitates economic opportunity for Latino organizations and Latino community at large. We have 36 member organizations across the state, and during the last election cycle, both general and runoff elections, we made contact with every single Latinx voter twice. My testimony today is based on our work informing, educating, registering, mobilizing, and providing transportation and interpretation to thousands of voters since 2018. Because of our deep work within various diverse communities in the state, we have seen firsthand the commitment of voters to have their voices heard, to show up in spite of the pandemic, to follow the rules and laws passed by the legislators since 2005. I am originally from Venezuela. I am now a naturalized citizen, and I've got to say that the story of Georgia is a story of participation, trust in the process, and in elected officials that I have to say my country has not had. How we continue building and strengthening this important partnership is something we would like to see. We are deeply concerned that SB 241 would greatly impact thousands of voters and limit their ability to exercise their right to participate in this democracy. Restricting access to absentee ballots by requiring witnesses to sign the document and eligibility requirements will impact millions of voters, not only Latino, and make it more difficult to participate in this process. Requiring copies of driver's license to be attached to the absentee ballot applications not only puts people's personal information in danger, but also overwhelmingly will affect people too poor to own a car and have a driver's license.
The gentleman's time has expired. We appreciate your input. We'd ask that you submit the remainder of your testimony in writing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Hannah Perkins.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Hannah Perkins. I work with the AFL-CIO, and I am here in opposition of Senate Bill 241. We stand strongly opposed to this legislation, and with respect ask that there be no vote on this today. The process so far has been rushed and has had an egregious lack of transparency. Working Georgians like those in our organization would face deep and direct harm from Senate Bill 241. Mail voting allows Georgians to cast their ballots while staying socially distanced from COVID-19, allows voters without reliable transportation to vote without barriers, and allows working Georgians to vote without being forced to take time off of their jobs. In the interest of time, I'll be submitting the rest of my testimony online. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perkins. We appreciate your input. Chair recognizes Robert Bryan. Mr. Bryan.
Honorable Chairman, Senators, thank you for your service and your concerns about integrity of our voting system. I appreciate your efforts to draw attention to the failures in the absentee ballot voting system and efforts to bring correction to it and reform to voting here in Georgia. I am Robert M. Bryan. I'm a resident of DeKalb County for many years, come from a family of active participants in the voting system. As you can see from my lanyards, I was very active in the voter review panel and other efforts, poll watching in the last election cycle. My concern has to do primarily with voter security, integrity of the system. And I worked for 35 years with the Fulton County Tax Commissioner's Office, retired under Arthur Ferdinand. I was personally responsible for millions and millions of dollars of things, including every decal that goes on every tag in Fulton County and the governments which we served. I personally was accountable and held accountable. I had a chain of custody. I served the people of this state under the laws that you pass here in the legislature. And it is possible. It's done every day in 159 counties in this state for you to be assured of each and every piece of paper and each and every ballot, that they all be standardized and appropriate to the systems that you use. I was opposed to the Diebold system. I wanted a transparent system that could be auditable. The Secretary of State, current Secretary of State, assured me we would have such a system. We do not have such a system. I suggest that we replace it with a system that tabulates accurately, is completely auditable, and was accountable as I was for every single decal, every single tag, without fail.
Time has expired.
Please provide such a system, and I thank you for your service, sir.
We're grateful for your input. Appreciate your interest. Chair recognizes Brad Carver. Mr. Carver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee. Brad Carver. I'm a resident of the city of Atlanta in Fulton County. I chaired our election confidence task force. We had 20 committee members, including your former colleague, Senator William Ligon. We had election lawyers. We had poll watchers, statewide poll watchers, ballot adjudicators, enormous wealth of experience. In those recommendations, we came forward with a number of proposals, and I want to tell you, just like you, we've been receiving thousands of emails. I won't compare it to what you do. Y'all are part-time legislators. I know how hard you work. I also know how this is an extremely important issue. We have seen a degradation in confidence on both sides of the aisle. We've seen it in 2018. We've seen it again in 2020. So confidence in the system is extremely important. I will tell you our recommendations that we made. The number one was dealing with absentee ballots. When I chaired this task force, I committed to everybody on the task force that we needed to look at things that make sense across the board. We pointed them to the Carter-Baker Commission from 2005, and in that commission it found that absentee ballots are the least secure method of voting. That's from President Jimmy Carter. That report advocates for in-person voting because of the risks that are associated with absentee ballots. Absentee ballots make it more likely for vote buying schemes to happen. They make it more likely for voter intimidation techniques to happen. And so therefore we strongly urge you to adopt this piece of legislation. We also think it's important to end no excuse absentee ballots. We think it's important to have a photo ID. I will point you to an AJC poll from just a couple of weeks ago. 74% of the state of Georgia supports voter identification for absentee ballots. That's an extremely strong number. I will note that. I will also point you to that same poll results. It found that 57% of the state, or excuse me, goodness gracious, I want to make sure I get the number right here. 55% support adding safeguards to safeguard the election. Only 41% support
Regrettably, the
making
gentleman's
voting
time
more
has
easy.
expired.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all
We're
that you
grateful
do.
for your input and your interest. Chair recognizes Tess Sharp. All right, thank you. The chair recognizes Eric Christensen. Okay. The chair recognizes Stacy Ramirez. Thank you.
Hi. So thank you for this time. I'm Stacy Ramirez, State Director of the ARC Georgia. I am here on behalf of a coalition of disability advocates, Rev Up Georgia. We worked tirelessly to support people with disabilities, mostly in rural Georgia, to get to the polls, to register, to be educated on the issues, and to get to the polls. And that is not easy to do in deep rural Georgia. Transportation, polls that are not close by. I am so worried about where we're going with this, the ADA compliance of this bill. I'm real excited about the hotline. Can we make it ADA compliant? Can it be accessible for people with disabilities? That would be exciting. Senator Harwell, if you're considering doing something with the privacy, could that screen also be accessible for those who are low vision, or also print disabled? Could we enlarge it? That would be exciting. So point of where I'm going with all this is there are a majority of citizens in Georgia that have disabilities, and I fear that we are not giving proper consideration with this bill. The general election and the runoff elections, we hit major roadblocks with getting to the polls, and now we are building walls that we won't be able to overcome, and we won't be able to get to the polls. So I just ask you to give consideration to people with disabilities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your input. The chair recognizes Scott Hall. Mr. Hall.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make it as brief as possible. Senator Dugan, I appreciate and applaud your efforts on behalf of this bill. I'm in support of the bill. I just think it needs one more provision, and that's some mechanism for inspecting the ballots. My name is Scott G. Hall. I'm a voter. I'm not an activist. I'm just a very, very, very concerned citizen. I was an observer during the general election, the recount, and the Senate runoff. I personally witnessed large quantities of absentee ballots that were marked by a printer, not by a writing instrument. An absentee ballot is supposed to be marked by a pen, a pencil. Not one of them had a blue, red check. Every one of them was a perfect oval, okay? As a voter, not as an activist, my first process, I said, this doesn't make any sense. State of Georgia spent $100+ million to implement a system that creates a paper ballot. We also required that we keep them for 2 years. There's a lawsuit that's been going on for 4 months trying to inspect these ballots and have yet to get to the very thing we spent $100 million to create. And that was a paper document that could be observed in these exact circumstances. I could not agree with you more. Okay, I want to get together and get to the bottom, but we have yet to been able to actually look at the very document that we spent $106 million to create, and we've been obstructed every step of the way. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I just think we need to tweak that one thing. There needs to be some other mechanism where a voter, okay, can get to those ballots and inspect them in a process. But thank you for
your input. That concludes our witness testimony for the afternoon. The chair will now open it back to the committee for final questions or comments. Senator Hatchett.
Mr. Chairman, I move
We're not ready to entertain a motion at this time, sir.
to make an amendment.
Amendment, excuse me. Yes, sir.
I move to make an amendment. Excuse me, I got it pulled up here. To Section 5, line 88.
Section 5, line 88.
Following the period after the word electricity, I'd like to amend the bill to add portable or movable polling places shall follow the same standards as they relate to voting access for those voters with disabilities as the building such portable or movable polling place is being used to replace.
I have a motion to amend. I would ask the senator from the 50th to provide that in writing for us. I have a second from Senator Miller. Is that correct? That's correct. Are there questions on the amendment? Chair recognizes Senator Robertson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I commend the senator and his amendment, and I've been educated here on some visual issues that I had not heard the term before. But I want to make sure that the identifying of the permanent precinct location, the bricks and mortar, that verbiage is the same when we identify it. Is that correct in the amendment?
That is my intent with this amendment, to basically, if a portable or movable polling place is used as provided from this code section, that the portable or movable polling place has to uphold the same standards as it provides for voting access to those with disabilities.
Right, I agree with that. I heard a phrase in there that jumped out. I thought I heard the word building or something of that nature.
In my amendment, I did say, as they relate to voting access for those voters with disabilities, as the building such polling place is used to replace. So it's
existing polling place, I think, was the term that we tried to use just for clarity moving forward. And if there's,
I have no issue with changing it to as the existing polling place such portable or movable polling place is used to replace, or is being used to replace, and I could submit this in writing.
I'd ask the senator to submit his amendment in writing with that clarification.
That's a good piece.
Are there other questions or comments to the amendment? Not, we'll entertain a motion on this amendment. I have a motion. I had a second. We're ready to vote. All those in favor of the amendment indicate with the uplifted hand. Hold on for just a moment, please. All those opposed, same sign.
Bipartisan amendment.
No no's, no negatives. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. The chair now entertains further discussion. Senator Burke.
Mr. Chairman, I want to correct a Scrivener's error on the first section of the introduction to the bill, line 15.
We have a request to correct a Scrivener's error on line 15. And what is your recommendation?
On line 15, there's a semicolon to provide for drop boxes. This bill doesn't address drop boxes, and that was left in the bill, is my understanding. So we just need to delete or remove that.
We have an amendment to correct a Scrivener's error. Is there a second? Second from Senator Robertson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of making this correction indicate with the uplifted hand. Thank you very much. All opposed, same sign. That's Amendment 2. No. Yeah. The chair will continue to entertain comments and questions. Senator from the 49th. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, I have a friendly amendment that I have discussed with the author that would relate to Section 3. And I have the 01 and 02 copies. I'd submit them to the chairman.
Thank you. The chair acknowledges Amendment 281829, which adds Section 3A. Is that correct, Senator?
That's correct.
And if I understand this correctly, this is essentially the language in Senate Bill 89. And that was a bill that this committee addressed a couple of weeks back and then had a floor vote. And we're adding that language to this bill in Section 3A.
That's correct.
I have a motion. Is there a second for this amendment? Second. Hold on. Question? Parliamentary inquiry? Second for discussion. I have a second from Senator Gooch. Now, we're ready for discussion. Senator Harrell.
I'm sorry, I don't remember the content of Senate Bill 89. Was that Senator Cowzert's bill, transparency?
I'd ask the author of the amendment to speak to that question.
This is the bill that we took up, I want to say it was Tuesday of last week, the 7:30 a.m. meeting. We passed it out of subcommittee, and then we passed it out of committee. And that was a floor vote on last Thursday on the floor, and that was Senate Bill 89. You have seen this. You have voted on this in committee.
Just give me the
and
content.
On the floor. It's the Elections Assistance Officer. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I didn't give you those key words. That's what you were looking.
Yes.
That's what you were looking for.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I understand. You don't remember the number.
But you're correct, Senator. It is
That's
Senate Bill 89, which is the elections. How did you rephrase
Elections
that?
Assistance Officer.
Election Assistance Officer in Secretary of State. The chair recognizes Senator from the Mountain.
Senator Miller, could you tell us for sure that this language is identical to what was in SB 89 that came across the floor, or are there any changes?
It is identical, word for word, except for the Scrivener's error.
Okay. I remember that. Thank you.
If you'll recall, it referred to section. It was 21-2.
That's right.
Yep.
So attempt to perfect the bill. Is that correct?
Yes,
Senator?
that's correct. That's correct.
Thank you. Senator Butler.
Mr.
Recognize the
Chairman,
leader.
Will you put the exact language in here? And what would that language say?
That language would give the parameters and the guidelines and the specifications for an election assistance officer that would aid in election jurisdictions that were habitually low performing. It would give them guidelines, best practices, and assistance from the Secretary of State's office. This position, you recall it? Okay. All right. You're nodding your head yes, and when
I am.
Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about, but shouldn't we put the exact language in the bill?
It is exact language, that's correct.
And so are we going to do that today?
Today, yes, ma'am. That's the amendment that's on the floor.
The amendment is on the way?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Is that
ma'am.
what you said? Okay. Thank you, Mr.
We're
Chairman.
having copies of that amendment made now for the
Thank
committee. And while we're waiting, we can certainly take a brief recess. Is that acceptable? 10 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you.
I was going to make a comment. A lot of the comments that were heard today were valid concerns, and we appreciate all the citizens coming out.
I concur with your observation.
We would encourage them also to continue through the process. This bill has a long way to go to get to the governor's desk. And once it gets through the Senate, it'll go to the House. There'll be more debate, more testimony, more amendments, and it could come back to the Senate. So don't give up. Keep working with the author of the bill, and we'll continue to make it a better bill.
I appreciate the senator's input. He is correct. This is not the last day we will have discussion or debate on these issues, and we welcome your input and your engagement and throughout the entire process. The chair recognizes Senator Burke. Excuse me, the leader, Senator Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't it also true that you asked the ones that were presenting today to address the bill and not previous issues?
That was the
2020
intent, Senator.
election?
That was the intent.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes the President Pro Tem.
Mr. Chairman, isn't it also true that if we keep taking questions, we won't have to have a break? We can
That's-
just keep moving,
that's exactly
and then
right.
we'll be through for the day?
We'll take 10 minutes while we
Keep
have
the hammer
amendment
down.
copied. Thank you. Available for the committee. If we could take our seats so that we could reconvene, I'd ask the senators to come and resume the discussion on amendment number 3.
Proud to have seconded that. That was appropriate.
We will resume our discussions and deliberation of Senate Bill 241. I'll recognize the President Pro Tem to speak to his amendment. You have copies in front of you.
Oh, Lordy. Hold on. I'm just going to call it from memory. As I discussed, this is the Elections Assistance Officer, and it provides for assistance for habitually low-performing jurisdictions, counties primarily, that would be not have the resources. Maybe they're on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale in terms of resources and to handle an increase in the number of ballots, as we had many-fold this past election. And it would further, if it worked with the elections officers to coach them, to mentor them, to share with them best practices, and if they are unable to or unwilling to rise to the level of competency that is appropriate and commensurate with their position, then it gives the State Board of Elections the opportunity to counsel them further, and even so far as suspend them. And it gives them an appeal period, and then the appeal period they can plead their case and may or may not be reinstated. And it's a very thorough and comprehensive document.
Are there questions on the amendment? We have already had a motion, a second, and we've had discussion. Are there any further questions on amendment number 3? Hearing none, I'd ask those in favor of the amendment to indicate with the uplifted hand.
Oh, sorry.
Those opposed by a like sign, please. 4. Thank you very much. All right, that amendment prevails. The chair would like to take a moment and acknowledge an individual who had asked to testify, and it was an oversight on my part. I would like to take a moment and return to input from our witnesses. The chair recognizes Annette Davis Jackson for input. Ms. Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to say that I'm in great favor of this bill. Reason being, there has been interference in our elections, and that's why I'm totally in favor. On section number 21, to have the constitutional officers preside over emergency rules, I'm for. For section number 20 with regarding ballot harvesting, it is illegal and it shouldn't happen anymore with third-party affiliates. Section 21-493, to codify a direct start. I do believe that in all 159 counties, but I do believe you need to juxtapose that with the law that's already on the books about counting ballots before everything has come in, because that's where you run into fraud. Section 18, to the county should report election day on election day. That's very important, so I'm in favor of that. Section 17, do not cease from counting. That's very important that you don't cease from counting. We saw a lot of ceasing from counting during the election, so I'm in favor of that. Section 16, the counts on election day for precincts in all counties posted publicly. I'm in favor of that. Section 14, the integrity of an audit. That's so very important, and we don't know that we've had the right audits within the Secretary of State's office, because, I mean, we don't even have the proper information, and like Texas, the way that they did. Section number 12, the totals must be reported to the county, and you need to have a line reporting. That's very important, and that should be by technology too, so that we can have a check and balance. So I'm in agreement with that. Section 11, the verification requirement, the signature. We need to really look at the signature verification, because as I look at the consent agreement that Raftenberger put together, in number 4, it states the consideration of additional guidelines for signature matching. The state defendants agreed to consider in good faith providing county registrars and absentee ballot clerks with additional guidance and training materials to follow when comparing voters' signatures that will be drafted by the political party committee's handwriting and signature review expert. I still believe in signature match. I'm just going to go to number 2 because I know my time is winding down, and I'd like to be very respectful of this committee. That consent decree we need to look into to provide advice, and the General Assembly needs to be that one authority over the Secretary of State. I do agree with that the Secretary of State should be an ex officio. He should have, or she should have, no voting rights. And I thank you for all that you guys are doing. And I'll end with, there should be an excuse to have an absentee ballot. There should be an excuse, a proper excuse to have an absentee ballot.
The
and
gentle lady's time has expired.
Right.
We appreciate your input.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate your interest.
Thank
you
you
very much. We now have final discussion on the bill. Let's make sure that we understand the bill that we are currently considering. Currently, it's LC 280273S. There have been 3 amendments. Amendment number 1 by Senator Hatch on line 88, adjustments there, and Senator Hatch, he's not hat it. Whatever. It's a hat trick. To add some language on appropriate disability support. Is that correct? We have an amendment by Senator Burke, which is a Scrivener error correction at line 15. And then we have an amendment number 3 by the President Pro Tem to insert section 3A, which is essentially SB 89. Questions on the bill? Recognize the Pro Tem.
Parliamentary procedure, Mr. Chairman. There is a Scrivener's error that I just saw. What would be the appropriate motion to withdraw this amendment, although we have voted on it?
Just one quick moment, please. Hold on.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
We will, since this bill, as amended, will have to have a corrected LC number associated with it.
Okay.
We can revise your component to correct the Scrivener's error. Could you notate that?
I will, and I'll bring that to the chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And whoever said it was a good idea for the Legislative Council to work at home?
Perhaps that's a challenge. The chair recognizes the senator from the whatever. What is it? Senator Harrell. Thank you. Thank you.
This is a question for the author, although he seems a little distracted right now.
Senator Harrell, state your question.
This is a question for the author. I came across a nonpartisan organization that spent the weekend doing an independent fiscal analysis of this bill, and they came up with a final price tag of $28 million. I have to ask the Karen Shack question. Is there a fiscal note on this bill? For the implementation of this bill is what their estimate was.
Okay, Senator, I appreciate it. I thought we were still talking about the amendment here. The number that I saw would be 28 million if you took into account that nobody in the state was already being provided these services currently. They are. So you're looking at
So you're familiar with the
Yes.
study that
Well,
I'm referencing?
I know that the minority caucus chair was the one who provided some of that information on our desk the other day. And if you were starting from zero, those numbers would be correct. You're not starting from zero.
Do you have a fiscal note?
I do not have one because I don't see a significant fiscal impact on the state because the stuff that we're requiring is either already provided or like the voter identification cards, or is through DDS, which the members are
What about
using
all
on
the
their-
like IT updates, and what about the hotline? Is
The
there a
IT
cost for the
updates are
hotline?
already, a lot of the IT updates that we're talking about are already existing. We're codifying. They came about in the emergency order, and we're codifying it. So that's already there. The IT updates at the county level that are adding a link button, no, Senator, I don't think that's a significant fiscal impact.
What about the hotline? Do you have an estimated cost for the hotline? I know I used to operate a statewide hotline, and it cost at least $250,000 to do that even 20 years ago.
I would, as crazy as this sounds, across the state, $250,000 in a $27 billion budget, it does not constitute a significant fiscal impact.
Right. I just was wondering about what the fiscal impact is.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Senator
far
Harrell.
been marginal is what I've seen so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harrell. Are there other questions on the underlying bill or the amendments? Senator Gooch.
I was just going to respond to Senator Harrell that, I think everything we do down here has an impact to our state budget to some degree. Every time we pass a law, there's an expense. And I think we owe it to the citizens of this state to ensure voter integrity and honesty in the elections in this state going forward. And we need to do that at the most efficient method possible. But there is going to be a cost to ensuring our elections. And there should be, and I would hope you would support that, because your constituents deserve to know that every vote that's cast is a legal vote. So I'm prepared to make a motion for pass of this bill at your
The chair recognizes the President Pro Tem.
Mr. Chairman, if working with Secretary Cook, if I could direct the committee's attentions to line 43 through 66. If we strike lines 43 through 66, then
We're discussing amendment number 3.
Amendment number 3. If you
Section 3A.
If you go to the body of your bill, you've already adopted that. So we're gonna move to strike lines 43 to 66, and it'll say section 3, and then it'll go to 3A, and that's where my amendment would be inserted.
So, President Pro Tem, am I understanding that you're taking my entire Section 3 out of the bill?
I think that was our understanding previously. Was that not, Chris?
That's not what he just said. That's what I thought we were doing.
We're striking 43 to 66 and adding the amendment in lieu thereof.
That is not what I understood we were doing.
That's an amendment. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Amendment number 4. In order to have discussion, I need a second. In order to have discussion, I need a second. Second for discussion, Senator Hatchett. Now, those who wish to speak to the amendment. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate and want to incorporate what the distinguished pro tem is wanting to do, but I don't want to lose my stuff as well. And my understanding is that after 66, we were going to, the original is when we were going to start inserting this language.
Well, let's go ahead and remove my amendment then. Let's remove my amendment in its entirety. I think it's in conflict if we leave it as is. Is that correct? It's been adopted. It's been adopted. It's been adopted. So, Secretary Cook, we would like to leave that in. We would like to leave this amendment in.
But that would be as section 3A.
3A.
Following line 66. Is
That'll
that
be
correct?
fine. That we'll leave it just that.
Is that acceptable?
That's
That's
acceptable.
what has already been agreed to.
Okay. That,
You've got Amendment 4.
Amendment 4 would have been removed 43 to 66, which we have a second.
We have a second for, but we have not
We have
voted
not
on.
voted.
On the floor.
It's on the
It's on the
floor.
floor. Yeah. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to withdraw 4A.
Thank you very much.
Amendment 4.
Is there
Amendment 4.
objection?
Unanimous consent to withdraw Amendment 4.
Without objection. Thank you. Further discussion.
Thank you, David.
Are you ready to entertain a motion? The chair will entertain a motion.
Thank you.
I have that is a motion to do pass by.
Make a motion do pass, substitute to SB 241 with LC number 280273S as amended.
As amended, and that would require a perfected LC, a different
Correct.
number, but that's where we're working from. I have a motion to adopt 241, a second. I have a second from President Pro Tem. Those in favor of the motion, please indicate with the uplifted hand. Those opposed, like sign. The do pass is by substitute is adopted. The chair notes that the vote was 7-5. Is that correct? Is there further business to come before the committee this evening? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you for your time and your patience and wish you a good evening. This meeting is adjourned.
Get that high hole to